Let's get started. Welcome again to Hang Out the Cafe. Let's start by, because not a lot of people know you. Some do, but for those who don't know you, can you just tell us a little bit about yourselves, please? Ladies first.
Ladies first. All right. So, hi everyone. My name is Ore, Ore Araba now, and I'm a voiceover artist, and I'm happy to be here. I know quite a few people here because I used to go to church with a few people here, Jesus House in London. Although I've moved now, I now live in Canada, so don't see people as much anymore. But yeah, that's really nice. It's really nice to be here. It's really nice, and it's nice to be on this side of Hangout Cafe. Normally, I'm behind the scenes watching. It's nice. It's nice actually being on live here.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, me now.
Yeah.
Well, my name is Steve Araba, and well, right now I'm a university professor. What else am I supposed to say? I'm a good guy.
Okay. I like that. All right, we're going to ask you about that. If he indeed is a good guy.
All will be revealed.
Oh my goodness. Yes, I was asking before you guys came on. I'm sure you heard the question. Did you guys do anything interesting yesterday?
We did. We did. So started off the day quite chill. We also went out for dinner, and it was a joint families dinner, I'd call it. So we went with another couple and their children to a nice Indian restaurant, and then we walked over to the falls, had a view of the falls, and then came back home. It was nice.
Well, yeah, it must be nice at night, because you went there at night, right?
Yes, yeah. So they have lights, so different lights being shown on the falls. So it's really pretty at night, but a lot of it is frozen. So the falls are still moving, but the water underneath at the bottom is pretty much frozen. And then there's some parts even next to the falls that have like clumps of ice. So it's quite an interesting sight to see, but very cold. So couldn't stay out for too long.
Wow. Okay. Great. So let's start. You know that Sound of Music song? Let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. So, how did you two first meet?
Okay.
And when did you first meet? How long ago?
This is where Steve, I think, starts because the story.
Well, so we'll try to make it very short because it's a very long story. But I think when I graduated high school was when I started praying to God about my wife, that I wanted God to show me who my wife would be. And I think maybe a year and a half later or 2 years, I remember going to church just at the end of service, when everybody's just chatting at the end of service somewhere in the back of the hall. But where we used for church service was more like open space. So around the fence of the church, I just heard a voice in my head, "Look back, that's your wife." Oh. And then I looked back and I saw her, a very pretty young girl. I was like, no, I bind the devil because at the time I was thinking maybe somebody really, really close to my age at the time, would be more like in sync, but that didn't happen. So I think after then I just started, of course, I dropped the idea because I was even still too young myself. Yeah. But God kept giving me dreams, about it, and then at different points, some impressions. And that was when I started praying about it. And so that was the real first beginning, right? Okay. But I think 5 years later, so along the line, I prayed some prayers about, okay, God, this is how I would want us to meet. This is where I would want us to talk. This are the signs that I want to show. I want people to be able to see us and say, okay, it looks like, this guy's fit. Just different details. I was very specific on many, many things. Okay. Particularly who would first say hi to who would first start the first conversation with who. Because there were many things that would make me feel like I'm not sure this would ever happen, So I was praying about that, and so 4 years ago?
4 or 5 years later.
Uh, yeah, we went to a Christian camp,
Okay.
which I think it was her first time at that Christian camp. It was a youth camp,
Okay.
so that would be the first time that we would actually ever have a
Right.
conversation. And it wasn't even a conversation about, oh, God told me 5 years ago that you'll be my wife. It was, okay, so
Hello,
now I
hi.
know, yeah, hello, hi.
Okay.
And I think that was it, basically. And then, of course, the first place she was the first person to start up the conversation, because I was just sitting down, just looking, like, what do I say? I don't know what to say. So she was like, "Oh, hi, how you doing?" And at the time, she had a knack, and she still does, for asking you what your goals are, your next 10 years,
Yeah.
your 3 year
Mm,
goals.
mm, mm,
And I
mm.
was just, I think at the time, maybe I was in my third year in the university,
Okay.
by then. So, I mean, what did I know? I just wanted to graduate. So there was a lot of conversation. So those were the kind of conversations we had. It was just friendship, just getting to know you, what's happening in school, what's happening with friends, church, and stuff like that. I think GCSE at the time, or I'm not sure which one we were doing.
Yeah. So I mean, across the years,
Yeah,
so God first told him.
Yeah.
yeah,
God didn't tell me anything.
Okay.
yeah.
God didn't tell me anything. Then we started talking. God still didn't tell me anything.
Okay.
And then so we just carried on being friends over time. I had an idea that he liked me, but it wasn't anything necessarily confirmed.
Why you had the idea because he was always talking to you and all of that?
Yeah, you can sort of tell. You can sort
Okay.
of tell. And like we got on very well, so it wasn't. It was just that it's just like, okay, yeah, sure. But it wasn't anything. I wasn't gonna do anything about it. I didn't. We also didn't live in the same country.
Yeah.
That's another thing to bear in mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I only came to Nigeria in the summers. At that time, I was living in the UK.
Okay.
So it was just summer. So we catch up over summer, sort of thing. Maybe a few phone calls here and there over the
Yeah.
years, but most of the catch up was over summers when I was in Nigeria. So there was that as well. But yeah, and then I think you'll.
So I think from the most significant things that happened between after then was just us keeping in touch, and then how many years later? Um, well,
Maybe
anyway,
10 years later or
So as
something like
far
that.
as you were concerned, or you were just friends.
Yes.
But you, Steve, you knew that God had said this was your wife. Okay.
yes, but at the same time, I couldn't tell her. I couldn't tell anybody. You know, because it at the time it didn't make sense. My walk with God, I had never heard anybody tell me that God spoke to them by saying, "Oh, look back, that's your wife." You only read that in the
Mm,
Bible.
okay.
So I couldn't tell anybody that. The only thing that I could say anything about was maybe that I had dreams,
Right.
that, oh, I had a dream that, this girl could potentially be my wife, something like that.
Okay.
Because at the time, I think my mom is a dreamer, or was a dreamer, so it was easy to relate with that part of maybe God speaking to you,
Right.
through that channel.
Okay.
So the rest of it was just me being her friend, and I told everybody, everybody that gets here, that okay, God spoke to me that this girl is going to be my wife.
This
But
was
I just
later.
had in conversations later, so that was the most of it. Yeah,
Literally, to know Steve was to know. So there was progressing later, but he'll go into that. But to know Steve literally was to know that there was an Ore somewhere at some points that was just not saying it. Like people will come to me years later at different points, like, what happened between you and Steve? I'm like, how did this story get to you? But it kept recurring many, many years. But anyway, go into how when you first mentioned.
Yes. So how
so
long after did you? How long
um
after you first met her did you tell her that God told me?
Probably like 10,
yeah,
10,
must have
11
been,
years.
10,
if
11.
not, I think 2011. So that was.
20. So there are two times. There was 2011 when you sort of mentioned, and then there's 2015 when you. Was it
Okay.
this?
You know why the
No,
dates might be confusing?
no,
Because
2005.
I asked her many times. So it depends on what date we're trying to pick now. But
No, when you
I
say,
think
Steve, when you say you asked, as in did you ask her that to be your wife or that God said? So,
oh, okay. I never told her that God said anything until 2015.
right,
You know, and at the time when I told her, it was, I mean, we had been back and forth on, oh, you know, I don't feel anything for you. I know you want this, but, you know, it just can't work, or I hope you find somebody else, you know, this kind of conversation.
right, okay,
And so when I would eventually speak with her about, I mean, when I would eventually tell her that God said something, it
yeah,
was, we were not even on that plane of the possibility.
right,
So it was more of the conversation around, well, I've been on your trail all these years, not because there are no other girls. You know, I just wanted you to know that this is the reason.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So it wasn't particularly a ask.
okay,
Uh, it was more like, I just want you to know, it might change your mind, but you know, so that was a conversation then, and of course it didn't change her mind. So
all right, please, what was it? Why didn't you? Was it that you didn't like him, or you felt God hadn't told you?
A combination of a few things. So first of all was the fact that, okay, we're friends,
Yeah,
right? So I respected him as a friend, and I'm not one of those people who like will beat a guy down when he tries to ask something. Like, no, politely, I'll say no.
okay,
But the thing was, I didn't feel like I had feelings for him.
okay,
And so for me, that was a stumbling, you could call it a stumbling block. You could call it something that made it difficult for me to say yes. And for me, if it's not a clear yes, it's a no.
okay,
I wasn't desperate to be in a relationship, and I felt it would be a disservice for me to say yes just because he seemed convinced and I
yeah,
wasn't.
yeah,
I just felt in the long run it wouldn't
yeah,
help. Now, to his credit, though, I think there are times when, independent of him, I had written down, okay, things I wanted in a spouse,
okay.
and he ticked
All the
a
boxes.
lot of the boxes.
Okay,
But that feelings bit
okay.
was
Did you
an
pray
issue.
about? Were you praying about it also at this time?
I had prayed about it
Okay,
at different points, but it wasn't a constant. God, what do you think? What do you say now? And the times when I did pray, I didn't hear anything. So
okay,
for me, I was just like, well, I've not heard anything. I have no feelings. I'm not going to commit to anything. Yeah, and then also, obviously, there was also the distance,
yeah,
right? So he was in Nigeria, I was in the UK. Nothing. So there was all of this. I mean, a lot happens maybe in between. We're friends. He will bring it up once in a while, and then we'll be a bit more distant, like not really speak as much, and then something will happen. We'll talk again, and then he'll bring it up, and then we'll be a bit distant again, and the cycle kept repeating itself. But then, yeah. So when he told me in 2015, I think actually, if anything, it probably did not have the effect he was looking for. It probably made me even more like, okay, then no.
that's weird.
Like, because you know all those stories you hear of people who said, okay, the Lord showed me that you're my
yeah.
wife, and I was just like, I know he's not like that, but at the same time, so that I would say made me even move back a bit. I was like, no, I'm not doing this.
So you know, one thing that I think may have made that conversation weird
Yeah.
was because so over the years there were things that I was specific about and praying about that God would do, maybe to show me that, okay, you know, this is a confirmation that this is the person.
Yeah.
And so I had a long list about things that she would see and readily know and identify.
Okay.
And so when I had that conversation with her, I was listing everything,
Okay.
you know, and I was saying it. So it's like everything was just, okay, this has happened, and there are things that I don't have control over. She doesn't have control over. It's just like life playing out,
Yeah.
you know, things in the weirdest circumstances. So I think that freaked her out a little bit.
So, I mean, you probably explain some of the things so it'll be easier to.
Okay, well, maybe some of the basic ones would be, how her parents were going to maybe mentor me or maybe draw me in, because at the time, my family, so I grew up just with my siblings. Okay, so we were just like these guys who were growing up without their parents, were young. So anybody could have a different impression about that kind of group. You're like, okay, they could be wayward, they could be, but thankfully, we all we all did very well, even as young people, So, and then this is a family who all well set up. They know what they're doing. Life is all well put together. There was that, I prayed about her cousins, being my friends or liking me. Prayed about her uncles, grandparents, the course that she would want to get into. I wanted her to be business savvy, tech savvy,
wow,
entrepreneurial.
Very specific.
I even prayed about, I think the last one at the time that I didn't know was even about where she would be resident, well, definitely not in Nigeria. And I was specific about that. And everything, so I was just saying everything casually, like, okay, well, you might change your mind, you might not change your mind, but I'm just saying my mind anyway, so that
everybody in her family loved you, apart from the person that you wanted to marry.
Yeah.
You could say so. You could say so. I mean, even to the point where, like, fast forwarding a bit, when I called my grandma to say, okay, grandma, there's somebody I've met, I want to get married to. She said, who? I mentioned, oh, it's Steve Araba. She's like, that name rings a bell. I don't really remember him. But is it the person who you guys used to go to this camp with? This, and I'm just like, for someone you don't remember, that's a lot of details. So even my grandma remembered him, and everybody in the family liked him. But for me, it was just that feelings thing was a major thing. Also, beyond that, I think the age difference was a bit of a thing. So between us, it's just less than 10 years, but for me at the time, it felt like a lot. And so there was that as well. I mean, it felt like a lot earlier. I think over time, as you grow older, you realize it doesn't make as much of a difference. But for me, it did at the time. So that was another thing that I was just like, it's just too much stress. I can't deal with this.
Okay, now I understand why Steve said at the beginning, after praying, and he turned and he saw you, and he said, God forbid, this was... And I said, no, God, before they come and say, cradle snatcher or something.
Even now, people would say cradle snatcher,
So there was all of that. So I mean, life kind of went on.
Yeah.
For him and for me. So we both, we kept in touch, but we both kind of led our separate lives. So things, for him, he got into a relationship. I think he probably got into that.
Yeah. In 2016, so now, of course, because of the back and forth, at some point I started thinking, okay, maybe I was confused, but I was convinced to think that I was confused, but I also understood the part that even if God has said something, the human element has to agree with it in order for that prophecy to come to pass. And in this case, there was this other person that didn't seem to agree. So I started praying about it to say, okay, well, God, the person you've spoken to me about is not working out. So I need to move on with my life. So what do I do? And I remember then, because all through the years, I was still praying for her by name.
Okay.
So, but by that time, I think it was the 2015 that I just thought, you know what, this girl is not going to come my way. So I need to start praying for my wife. So I remember the first time I decided to start praying for my wife, who I thought wouldn't be her. I said, okay, God, so all the prayers that I've been praying for Ore all these years, can you transfer to this whoever my wife could be? And then I started praying, the same way, because I'd seen this, praying specific prayers, I'd seen it work for her. I mean, work with her.
Yeah.
So I started doing the same thing about my future wife.
Okay.
And so I had my list. God, I want her to be this and that and that. So I remember I went to to facilitate a seminar at the U.S. Embassy in Lagos one time, and I met another lady, and who happened to have gone to the same university that graduated from the same university I graduated from.
Yeah.
And so one of the times, so we had started talking just casually on different projects, but we had a lot of things in common, in quotes. And so one of the mornings I was praying, it's like, okay, God, so my wife will be this, my wife will be that, and blah, blah, blah. I just, my mom was just going to that girl. I was like, oh, okay. It looks like it might be, this girl may work. So I think I just started praying about her. I mean, that other lady. And then I was like, okay, well, God, if she doesn't have a boyfriend, then I'll take it as maybe it might be the person that's in my life, to make it work. Because really, I'm an introvert, so it's not like I go all out to meet people on a normal day. I have my way around my weaknesses, my introverted weaknesses. That's the way to put it. But I do. So anyway, I felt that this might be the person God was bringing in my life. And so I prayed about it. I felt peace in my heart, but it wasn't like, oh, go thou my son, this is now thine wife. So I went to meet her, and I spoke with her. I was like, okay, you know what? This is how I'm feeling, or this is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And so you go pray about it, because she's a Christian too. You go pray about it. Whatever God says to you, is what we're going to work with, right? And I also told her about Ore, to say, well, I know God spoke to me about someone, but it's not working. So I'm just moving on with my life, because it takes two, to work together on that. And she was like, okay, she understood me, and then went to pray. About 2 months later, about 8 weeks, she came back and said, okay, well, God said yes. And that was how we started our relationship. So I was in that relationship, for about 3 years. And so that was like one of the things that happened. I wasn't even thinking about her anymore.
Okay.
But of course, in the cascade of things, I saw how God used that also, to put me on the path that I needed to be, before that ended. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was his life. For me, I was carrying on with life.
Someone sorry, Catherine said that she won't pray when, I know, as in this, I guess, referring to the lady that you said you're told about Ore, and she still went to pray.
Then I won't pray when I know there's one Ore. When Ore too was delaying and saying she doesn't want to do, I understand. So, I mean, for me, carried on with life. I think I graduated by then. I was working, just getting through life sort of thing. But the funny thing that was happening on my side was that anytime there was somebody I was considering, I would always pray about it. And each time God would say no. There was one point, there was somebody that I was just like, it cannot be good. Why would God say no to this? Like, it can't be. So with that person, I got talking with the person.
Yeah.
And then I could see where things were heading. And then at some point I went again. I was like, okay, God, so, this person, what do you think? And all I heard was, I've already told you, I've already answered your question. What more are you expecting? Something like that. I was like, oh.
But God didn't tell you that it was Steve. It's just that this other person or people,
God just kept saying no.
Okay.
God just kept saying no. He didn't say it was Steve. He just kept saying no.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, it's like, what are we doing? At some point, I was like, God, if it's that I'm not supposed to get married, just let me know. That way, I can know where to focus and not keep looking at saying, okay, is that the one or should I expect another? Each time, just let me know. So that I got into that point. I think I had a conversation with you about that as well sometime in the past. I was just like, you know what? Even if I don't get married, it's okay. But it'd just be nice if God let me know so that I can just focus where I need to focus, and just, fulfill destiny or do whatever I was called to do. But I did remember that each time I I consider somebody, God would always say no, or God would make them say no, such that they would be the ones to even say before I even get to it. Okay. And so as a result, I hadn't been in a relationship all that time. So then what happened to you?
Then what happened? Yes, fast forward. Tell us what happened.
What happened to me? From what point?
So you were with your ex, and then at some point.
Yeah. So I was with my ex. Yeah, like I said,
for Canada.
Yeah, we started making plans to get married. We were going to, I think, so I had moved to Canada already. So I think I'd spent about 6 months. So, because of the way things were, we already made plans for her to move to Canada. Everything was set. So the idea was to go to Nigeria, get married, come back with my wife. I already got a place, had a job. Everything was looking like,
Sorry, just for people to be clear,
yeah.
He's talking about his ex now, not Ore to
Yeah.
move to Canada. Okay,
Yes.
go on.
So, yeah, and of course, long story short, went to Nigeria. Okay, so part of the challenges we had that I had with my ex was she's from a different tribe, and the dad didn't, or the parents didn't quite want somebody from my tribe, So we had all those issues. The mom would be in and out, but the dad was dead on no.
Okay.
And so at some point we had thought, well, we had spoken with the dad, spoken with the mom, spoken with the dad's pastor, spoken with, a lot of people that should be trusted by the dad to, at least speak with him. And he was just like, no, if okay, not too much details, but he was more like, no.
Okay.
And so we spoke about it, myself and my ex, we spoke about it, and we're like, well, somehow, this is something that they can catch on with eventually, so do we want to get married? Do we want to break up? What is the decision? If she said God said yes to you, I know what my position is. And I already told her that, despite the fact that I knew God spoke to me about someone, even if Ore came back into my life at that point, there's that, it was more or less like she was my ex was the only one who could break that relationship. I told her.
That's good.
Because I thought, what if Ore came back and said, oh, you know what, the conversation we had, I'm in a relationship. If it was you wouldn't want that, so so that was the one thing that I did that kind of, bound me to, I was bound by my words, basically. So I wasn't going to say, oh, because your dad was not, her dad wasn't agreeing, you know what, maybe we should just go our separate ways. So that was one of the reasons that I was like, well, God, if this is not you, whatever it takes, even if it's on the wedding day, please crash it. I'd rather have a bad wedding day than have a lifetime of what you don't want for me. So
what happened?
We planned the wedding, came to Nigeria. I went to Nigeria, and
it was supposed to be a court wedding.
It was supposed to be a court wedding, very small wedding. And then the same night we get on the plane, head for Canada, and then we'll call her parents from there. That was the plan. But one of the times when we went to the court to do some signature, what's it called, like oath taking, to just
to say that you've not been married before, that sort of thing.
We, on the way back, I remember my spirit was troubled, and I just kept praying, like, okay, God, what's this feeling? Is it cold feet? What's going on? And I remember the Holy Spirit telling me to say, okay, what if it was your daughter that wanted to get married to somebody you don't approve of? And I was like, well, I know I'm going to be, rational. I'm going to be sensible. I'm not going to impose my will on. It's like, oh yeah, you are going to be rational, but what if the same situation
Yeah.
happened? I was like, well, I wouldn't want my daughter to get married without my consent or without me approving. And then the Holy Spirit said, don't set a precedent in those exact words. And so we were on the way from the, from the, what's it called?
Registry.
Court registry. I mean, we had gone to do all the document signing, but not for the wedding, just a verification process. And so we were in an Uber ride going home, or going to drop her off at her place, and then I would go back to my place. And so it was in that ride that I just told her, you know what, let's not do this wedding part, but on Saturday, let's still head to Canada. You take a break from work, a week or two, and we head out to Canada, and then we'll speak to your parents again from there. Because you're speaking with them under their roof. Maybe that's why they don't think you are an adult enough to make your own decision and all of that. So anyway, so that was the plan. But of course, on Saturday, she comes to where I was. She didn't have any bags. She didn't have anything. And that was the day she broke it off. She broke off the relationship.
Did she say why?
No, she didn't say why, but I never asked her even after then.
Really?
Because the truth was I knew the issues with her parents.
Right. Okay.
And at the point when she's broken up with me,
were you kind of happy that she did?
there was some very weird joy that happened in my heart. It was, I didn't feel trapped, right? It wasn't like Ore was in my life or anything. In fact, we weren't even speaking at the time.
Yeah.
So there was no reason why I would have that joy. But for me, because I was listening to my spirit a lot, so I felt like, okay, something good just happened. I don't understand why. I just have to go with the flow. So what I just immediately she broke it off. Another friend was going to come. I was like, okay, you know what? This other mutual friend coming. Do you still want to be here? She said no. I booked her an Uber. Saw her off to the car. Gave her a hug. Sorry about all of this. But it was nice knowing you. That kind of thing. And shut the door for her, trying to do gentleman even though I was crying inside. So, now she didn't tell me why, and I never asked her. And the reason I didn't ask was because I think on my own side, at least the way I processed it, on my own side, I felt like I did everything that I needed to do right.
Okay.
Now, if she had an issue, it may be an issue of interpretation or whatever. But I just thought, you know what, you're not my business anymore. So anyway, I think I just figured out a way to move on. Of course, I was in pain, so I never bothered to ask anyway. So
okay,
now,
so how did you get back to Ore?
Yeah.
All right, somebody said when he was talking about his ex that when I was talking about when they broke up, I'm sure you saw I think it was Joy, that you were smiling.
So I'm not smiling at this story. Not smiling at the story. I look at him and I smile anyway. But so it's not because of the story. But it was actually quite sad for him. I mean, even in that whole thing, although he's described it that way, the way he's actually described it to me, besides that, was the fact that it was a momentary feeling of joy, almost like like it wasn't what he was expecting to feel. Okay. But then shortly after, there was almost like,
I'm going back to Canada, single, stressed, and still searching.
Because I mean, this is somebody who, his family were all abroad, right? So most of them weren't going to be there at the wedding. Okay. But the expectation was, Steve is coming. They're going to have a party when he got back there, you know, to welcome his new bride, and all of a sudden, none of that is happening. So for him, he's being brave about it now, but it did take its toll on him. I just thought to mention that. But having said that, so this all happened, I think was that 2018? when you?
Yeah, 2019.
2019. So that happened. I wasn't aware at the time. I didn't find out until maybe, I don't know if it was a year or two later, or I don't know when I found out.
No,
A
it
few
was
months.
later that year.
Okay. So I found that later that year. I was like, oh, wow, okay. Because for me, in my mind, I just like, okay, at least I was actually happy for him when I found out he was in a relationship. In my mind, I was thinking, oh, at least he can move on with life, and
And you two
basically, I'm
can
no
move
longer.
on, so he stopped harassing you.
No, for me, I had been clear where I stood. So,
Okay.
and I did not. I felt right in how I had expressed it. I wasn't rude. I just said, okay, look, I didn't feel like it was gonna go. So for where I was concerned, I felt like I done right by him.
Okay.
But at the same time, he was a friend, so it wasn't a complete like, oh, bye and good riddance.
Okay.
Now this had happened to him, so I wasn't happy about that for
Okay.
him. But that's what had happened, right? So that was 2019. Yeah. Then I think we'd spoken maybe once or twice, well, a few times in between, but not anything serious.
Yeah,
as
like
such.
birthday, maybe there's a birthday, grandparents, she lost one or two grandparents within the time. So, we just say, oh, my condolences and stuff like that. So we may have a conversation or two around the time, but, and it might be a long one, and then we just close shop. So, yeah.
But 2022, I had come to Nigeria for my grandma's funeral. Mm-hmm. And so all the funeral proceedings had happened, all that. We've been in touch briefly, just condolences kind of thing. And then somebody who's a mentor to me and also a friend of my mom's asked to see me. He told my mom he wanted to have a meeting with me. I was like, okay, cool. I just thought it was a general, let's go and visit. So I went to my mom and he's like, no, he wants to speak to me alone. I'm like, okay, this is new. And then he's like, okay, so what's going on? How are you? How are things relationship-wise? And I'm like, well, there was somebody I was speaking to. So I was like, oh, yeah, someone I'm speaking to, but I'm not in a relationship. And then he goes, oh, he heard about this Steve guy. I'm like, how did this get to you? Like, from where? And I knew Steve didn't know him personally. Steve knew of him, but I didn't think they had a personal relationship. So no. I was like, how did he get to you? But I have some ideas about how it got to him, but I'll leave that anyway. So I was just like, oh, okay, what about him? He's like, well, yeah, he would like to speak to him and, just to suss him out. I'm like, I call him Uncle. I was like, Uncle, I'm not trying to raise this guy's hopes up. I've said no all these years. Nothing has changed. Yeah. You going to speak to him might make it look as if there's something there where there isn't. It's like, no. I should trust him. He just wants to speak to the guy. I was like, okay. I said, okay, fine. So, and also he was going to travel to Canada at the time. So he was thinking maybe he would meet up with him and just speak to him. But then, so he got in touch with him, found out that the time when my mentor was going to go to Canada, Steve was actually going to be in Nigeria, in Abuja. So they weren't going to meet each other, but they just spoke, sort of thing. So they had that conversation. And then early the next morning, my mentor is an early riser. He sent me a message, oh, are you awake? I happened to be awake at the time. And so I sent a message saying, yeah, I'm awake. He said, oh, can you call? He called. This was probably, I don't know, whether it was 5 or 7 a.m. or something like that. This was in Nigeria. And then he's like, okay, so all right, I just spoke to Steve. I'm like, okay. Like, all right, that man is your husband. I'm like, oh God. Like, how do we deal with this now? I was like, after one conversation with him, it's like, yeah, he said, when it was his sister's turn, he told her, the other guys that came, and he told her, no, this one will work for you. And then the guy that was like, yeah, this guy would work for you. They got married and they're living happily ever after, and all that. I was like, okay, I respect your opinion, but I don't quite feel that way. And so I don't quite feel that way, but thank you. Being as polite as I could be. But then obviously he had a conversation with Steve. So Steve then sends me a message like, oh, we should talk. This person just called me. It's like, okay. He comes on the phone and then he says, okay, basically like he thought maybe the person was actually reaching out, maybe more for my mom. Maybe he needed somebody to help him in Canada with something. Yeah. So he was taken by surprise by the conversation as well. So I said, oh, I'm really sorry, but I can't give you what you're looking for, Basically, I think those were
Yeah.
my words. And he was just like, well, let's just not talk.
Steve, you
Talk about
really
this.
tried, though. You really tried.
Well, we're more than conquerors.
But okay, so I mean, again, nothing had changed for me. I wasn't trying to lead him, and I'd been very, very clear as much as I could be, so that it never was that I was leading him on in any way.
Yeah.
But that had happened again, and so that made us just not talk. So we just said, okay, distance. We're not going to talk. Just let this thing go. And then 2023 happened. So in 2023, do you want to share what? Okay, well, actually, no, there's some parts in between before that with your mom.
Yeah, so after that conversation, which happened to be, one of my brother's birthday, so we had a big celebration. I was like, oh, this girl's name is coming up, at a family event. Can I breathe? And then, so that happened. Of course, we spoke and then nothing. And then the next year was 2023.
Before that, your mom at your house, the prayers.
Oh, yeah. So now my mom came to stay with me 2022, October, November, and December. And around the time of, generally African mothers, so when are you going to get married? And I usually would tell her, well, the day I will get married is less one day today. Like, I don't know the dates. Just leave me alone, And, and she would pray with me. And, at the time, many things were going on with my mom also.
Okay.
But I remember that one of the times she just called me and was like, okay, she had seen an update of my ex, online, that she was in Canada and all of that. And she was like, okay, so you made all the plans to come to Canada and, that the girl is now in Canada at your expense. I was like, no, she's not there at my expense. It happened, life goes on. And she then asked, okay, so what about Ore? I was like, well, I don't really talk to her anymore, but I mean, we kind of touch base once in a while, but she says, no, I'm not even thinking about her anymore. And I just realized, and she just asked, okay, and you're sure she's the one God told you about? I said, yeah, that's still the only one God ever said anything about. And so I think subsequently, like, she prays in the middle of the night, and then I would hear her praying, for my siblings, their children. She prays for everybody by name, or she prayed for everybody by name. And then one of the nights, I just waited to listen for what she would pray for me, because she had just prayed for my sister, and I was just outside the door, but I could hear her pray.
So she would pray for his siblings and their spouses and their children.
Okay.
So he was waiting to see what she would say about him.
Yes. So she just called my name, prayed for me, called Ore's name, and then prayed for 2 kids, and their 2 children, something like that. I was like, okay, that's weird, but I'm not going to question mommy. She can do whatever she wants in the place of prayer. That happened like 3 other times, maybe like 4 days in between that. I was maybe going to use the bathroom and I just hear her praying, and then I just wait. Same thing. I was like, well, God, at least I know you hear mommy's prayers, so maybe this might happen. Now, the next year, 2023, January, mommy passed on. And then so because of that, there were now burial arrangements and all of that. And so Ore's dad, thank you. Ore's dad called me. Ore's mom called me. Ore's brother called me. And then she sent a message. I was like, no, you didn't.
You could call.
In my defense, we had said we will not talk. I did not know if this guy hated my guts. I did not know if he wanted to even hear my voice anymore. Right. And somebody else I'd spoken to had said he's not taking calls. Okay. So I just said, you know what, let me not add to anything. Let me at least send a message saying, I just heard, sorry to hear about it. Right. Left it at that. But then somebody who was a family friend of ours then forwards me. I mean, he had already sent the funeral details to my parents because my parents, independent of me, he had a relationship with them just like as mentors.
Okay.
So my mom had forwarded it to the rest of us in the family. And then randomly, a family friend of ours forwards me the details of the funeral. I'm like, this is weird. How does she know that I know him? How does she know that I know him well enough to forward me the details? And why? She said, like, where is this coming from? Sort of thing. But I didn't question it because over the years, every time somebody will always say, what about Steve?
Okay.
I thought this was that thing that was happening again. Somehow it had gotten to her. It was going to, so I expected at some point she was going to call me and ask, what about Steve? So left it at that. The funeral went, proceedings were going on. During it, I followed everything online because everything was streamed on Zoom. And then I sent him a message somewhere in between saying, oh, how's it going?
Yeah.
And then at that point, he just did not respond.
Yeah, I just sent a thumbs up, like, you do you wherever you are.
I'm not even sure if you responded.
No, I did respond.
A thumbs up, okay.
I didn't say anything. It was just a thumb up, yeah. So now, of course, at this point, I just didn't want to hear her name, for any reason. But what then happened was, so this same family friend of hers, we then discovered she was my mom's cousin, maybe second cousin or something. So she came to the US where we had the funeral. So
Right.
at the somewhere around the ceremony or the events happening, she says, "Oh, she called me by my Yoruba name, but she was like she wanted to speak with me." I was like, "Okay, fine." And then she was like, "What happened between you and Ore?" In my mind, I was like, "Who? How did you even know that name?" Fire, 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 blood of Jesus, delete, I was like, no, I don't want to hear this name again, so, but we had the conversation and I was really open with her and very honest. I was like, you know what? I don't even care anymore. Whatever she's thinking, whatever is in her mind, it can stay with her. I'm not interested anymore, and then she just made a simple statement. She was like, because I didn't tell her, oh, God spoke to me, or all that part. I was just like, well, we've been friends. It didn't work, full stop. And then she was like, you know what? I'm going to speak with her.
Okay.
And I know you're angry, but I want you to try to be open.
Okay.
Because I don't want this to not work because you are not open.
Okay.
So like, it could work on her. I mean, Ore could now be open to the conversation now, but she didn't want me to be closed up about it.
Okay.
And I simply just told her, like, all the good luck with that, like, well, a lot of people have tried. It's never worked. I don't know what magic you want to perform. And I just left it at that. I didn't even pray about it. I was like, it's probably not going to work again anyway. So, so that was it. And then, yeah.
So before she even left this was the US, right? Before she left the US, she sent me a message like, "Ora, we need to talk." Remember this? What about Steve conversation always pops up somewhere every year. Somewhere someone always does so. So I was sort of expecting it. It's like, okay, we need to talk. I'm like, okay, in person or over the phone. She's like, oh, she said it's in Yoruba, like which is like where basically face to face. But then she got to the UK. She didn't even get home. She called me from the airport, and she was just like, "What happened between you and Steve?" I was like, "What do you mean, Auntie?" Just like, you're answering me with a question. I'm like, "Yeah, the one breaking this thing up." I'm like, "What is it?" I said, "Don't even bother." She's already gotten the full details from Steve. That why would I consider it? Good families on both sides. Da, 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 da. I'm like, I don't have feelings for him. And then she was just like, okay, like maybe, try out a few dates, whatever. I was like, okay, I'll pray about it, right? That was my only way of getting. I wasn't going to commit to dates either because, again, for me, I said no so often that for me, dates, committing to, okay, let's go on a few dates, for me, felt like it's giving green light. And I was not ready to give green light like that. So I was nothing had changed for me. So I just thought I'll pray about it. And I left it at that. But then I did pray about it. again, true to my word. And then for the first time, I heard God say, "Give it a chance." That's scary.
Ooh, we're getting
Just like
somewhere now.
I've told no all these years. You're now saying give it a chance.
Okay.
This person probably hates my guts. Like,
Yeah, and I did.
my last message, you didn't really respond to properly. So how's this going to work? And even with that, it wasn't a straight do something about it. I spoke to a few people who some who are my mentors, some who are peers, to say, okay, this is the whole situation going on. What do you think? And after I told them the whole story, they're like, you know what? Maybe you should give it a chance. I'm like, I'll tell the second person, maybe you should give it a chance. I told one of the pastors at church, maybe you should give it a chance. I'm like, oh, okay. We'll see. I mean, I had sent him a message. He hasn't responded, so, we'll see. But then at some point, he then sends a message saying, oh, everything went well, that sort of thing. So we started talking a little bit again after that. And then at some point, I think I was going to go somewhere and I was going to drive. So I don't like texting for too long. So after I was like, look, can I call you because I'm going to drive. I can't text. So we started talking a little bit like that. Funeral happened in February. We started talking later in February. And then by March by March, we started talking about maybe we should meet up at some point.
Yeah.
We didn't mention anything relationship, by the way. We were just talking, but we both knew what had happened, the conversation that had been had. So I thought, okay. And then eventually we just thought it could be better or easier for him to come to the UK. Also do it in a way that like we're not involving any community members because people are invested in this thing happening. And so it was the easiest way to meet without anybody knowing or coming involved. Like the people who were important to me were aware. When I say important to me, people who just accountability wise, people who I told about it but were not part of the community members that were invested in the past were aware that he was coming. And then
so before this even happened, sometime January 5, January 2nd, I was praying about the year and all of that. And I remember that, so I attended a meeting online, January 5, and it was like a Christian meeting and all. And then God sent somebody to me to say, remember the promise that I made. God said to remember the promise that he made to you. And I was like, the only thing that I know God has ever told me was, this marriage thing, and it didn't work. So I don't have any issues. This was even before mom passed on, right? It was just a few days. And then, so that year I prayed that God, let's not even do this wedding anymore. This marriage thing anymore. Maybe you had a plan, excuse me. Maybe you had a plan, it's not working, or maybe you can't work out your plan, whatever, but
as if God can't.
Just I know you've been true to me. You've proven yourself real to me for me to not believe that you exist. So whatever the case is, maybe this word married thing is a little bit too much for you to handle. So I'm okay. I'm shutting down. I'm not even praying about this married thing anymore.
Is it me? I can't hear you. I think it's gone off.
Is it back on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So on January 5, I attended a meeting online, and then God said, remember the promise he made you. And so that day, I remember going online, so the instruction also came with, as the stars are to Abraham, God said to get something to remind you of what I have told you.
Okay.
So because the only thing I had was just this marriage thing. So what I did was I went online on my American Express credit card to get an additional card on my account in her name.
Wow.
Maybe it's upstairs.
Wow. And this time she hadn't agreed or anything.
No.
We were
not even spoken.
Yeah. Wow.
So I got the credit card in her name, just hyphening Ore Luaketon Apampa Araba. As so every time I'll just whenever I was making a purchase, I would look at the card. I was like, God, okay. It was the most private way that I could remind myself,
Whoa.
right? And so when all of these things started happening, the funeral and then all the connections, of course, I was still pissed off, but I was like, maybe it might work this time, if that prophetic word was true. I've had a conviction that it was true. I just didn't know when,
Okay.
so that was something. And so when all of this was happening, it was me just, okay, let's just talk. Okay, let's just see where it goes. And then went to the UK. We talked. Yeah.
Yeah, he came for about 5 days.
Yeah.
Wow.
All I kept telling God was, God, I'm following you here. If he asks me how I feel, I'm not going to lie. But God, you said give this thing a chance, so I will give it a chance. He's coming to the UK, so he stayed in a hotel not far from where I was staying.
Yeah.
And so we just caught up. So I cleared my schedule for that week.
Yeah.
Because I was working for myself at the time, so doing voiceovers. So I had freedom of time basically. So cleared my schedule. So we just meet up during the day sort of thing, and just talk, maybe just go for a meal somewhere. So just did that for a few days, and then on the Thursday, so he came on a Monday. On the Thursday, I took him to church and to meet a few people. Met Pastor Badge, met one or two other people as well, and there. So when we got there, we got into his office, the Pastor Badge's office. Oh, there's another bit I'll mention there, but we got into Pastor Badge's office, and I saw that he was just talking to us generally. Like obviously he knew the whole story.
Yeah.
But then I felt like he was a bit reserved in some of the things he was saying. So I said, I'll leave you guys to talk.
Okay.
I'll go around the corner, call me when you guys are done. So he goes in and then he speaks to him.
Right.
And then he then tells him, okay, you know what? What you've come to the UK to do has already been settled.
Yeah. Well, when he said that, I wasn't sure exactly what he meant. Whether is it this relationship or maybe there's a bigger thing happening, because at the time I had a journey with God that I was beginning to, I wasn't sure exactly what God wanted to do, but I was just walking with God blindly, what. So I wasn't sure exactly what it was saying. Does this mean maybe I have an assignment in the UK or something like that? But the only thing I was there for was, because of woman. So he did say that. He said a number of other things. And, I just rested on the fact that, okay, well, I'm here at this time. I don't know what the result is going to be, but I'm just going to go with it and see where it ends.
Okay.
So that was it.
Yeah. So that happened. And then, so we left. We went back to my place so I could make some food for him. Because I told him that day, I'm not eating, I'm fasting today. I didn't tell him why, I just said I was fasting. But really, I was fasting because I was like, God, this guy's going tomorrow. I don't know what we're doing here. Nothing has changed for me. And I don't want to be like I led him on. I've spent all these years being very careful not to lead him on. And now him coming over and then me saying nothing has changed, it's going to be like I'm leading him on. And that wasn't my intention. Okay. So I was, so got home. He was in the living room at some point. Then in the kitchen, I was just warming up some food, washing dishes. And then he came and he was like, oh, so what do we call this? I'm like, well, you can call it whatever you want, but I'm praying to God about something. I need you to be patient with me. He comes back again. He's like, should I have come with a ring on this string? Please bear with me. I'm still praying to God about something. I can't say no. Basically, he then comes back a third time. He's like, okay, should I ask you to marry me again? I'm like, you have to bear with me. I'm praying to God about something.
No, that's not what she said. She said, you can ask, but you still have to wait for me to do everything she was saying. It was like, you can ask, like, you can ask.
Yeah, that sounds like
no.
I had to be honest as well.
Yeah.
So all of that happened, and then so he went to the living room. He was sitting down there, and then I remember I was washing dishes, and I felt God say, "Go and eat with him. I've already answered your prayer." I was like, must be my mind playing tricks on me, because when you're fasting, you don't want to fast. That's when you start hearing all sorts of things. But then it was like the voice was just short of me hearing it, like somebody speaking to me directly, and I kept hearing over and over again,
Okay.
go and eat with him. I've already answered your prayer. Go and eat with him. I've already answered prayer. So the point where I think verbally I said, fine. I'll go. So I brought the food out and I was like, okay, you know what? We'll both eat. I'm gonna break my fast early, sort of thing. And so we ate. It was fine. And then I don't know what came over me in this period, in that instant, but literally I just told him to hold my hand, which is very uncharacteristic of me. I wouldn't randomly tell him hold my hand, but he held my hand and I looked at him, and somehow it was like something changed.
Woo!
Like something changed. It was like a light switch just went on, and I just saw him completely different there, and I was like, okay, I don't know what's going on here. So I didn't tell him at that point because I was still trying to figure things out. We still had one more person to see later that day, and so we went to see the person, but then I hadn't told him obviously, and then at some point the person had another appointment briefly. So he then looked at me, he's like, wait, this thing that you're praying to God about, does it mean it can be a no again? And I just said, I don't know. His face just went down. I was like, oh God. Okay. Anyway, now I shifted all my voiceover work to later, but there was a deadline I had for Friday, so I couldn't stay to chat for too long. So afterwards, dropped him off at this hotel and then had to go back home. And then so I slept early so I could work on it overnight because the next day I was going to take him to the airport. So I woke up, started working on it, and now opened my phone, saw some long message from him about how, okay, this week has been great, but he's going back to Canada and, going back to how things were, something. I was like, oh gosh. Okay, I sent him a message. Don't worry, God has answered my prayers. Like, not worrying is what I've done since 1990 something. Okay, I'm coming. As I like to say, it was morning by this time anyway. So I said, okay, I'm coming. So I went to his hotel. And then I did this. Again, I don't know what came over me, literally. I was just like, okay, hold my hand. He held my hand, and I was like, we can call today day one. Then looked at me. And I was like, yeah, day one of us, day one of forever, day one. He was like, does this mean what I think? I'm like, yes. I think he was in shock for a little while. And after,
can you imagine? He's been waiting for years.
Yeah. But the thing about it that made it funny, especially in that moment, was for me, I knew that if she said yes, I didn't need to figure out, oh, so do we start talking stage again? It's like I knew that once if she said yes, she meant it, because that's been her character all along.
Okay.
She would never say what she didn't mean, right? And so I was just like, okay, so this is what I've been waiting for all these years.
Steve, they're even singing for, is this love? Is this love that I'm feeling?
So it was really pretty beautiful in that moment. I was shocked. I didn't know how to even react. I think maybe we held hand and we prayed. Yeah. That was it.
I know. I mean, you guys, but we need to fast forward this. But I need to let people know this was it from when you met, God first told you, to when you got married? Was how many years?
24 years.
24 years. Yeah.
24 years. 24 years, folks. Steve waited for 24 years for this already. Wow. Well, this is so sweet. Wow. Anyway, anything else interesting before? I need to ask you guys some questions about now that you're married. So, anything important that you need to share again before I get to the next question? I know you guys eventually got married in December of that same year.
November.
Was it
November?
Oh yeah, it was November. Yes.
November.
Yes.
So everything kind of just snowballed after that. Like I said, I was the only person who wasn't on board. So the rest of my family were pretty happy to hear about it, and then we kind of just went on with things. I mean, for me, at the point where I said yes, for me that was me making the commitment. So whether the wedding happened the next day or a few months after, for me, I was committed. And so we just did the usual stuff. So the traditional, first of all, the introduction that happened in two locations. So I went to meet him in the US, and then my parents met his side in Nigeria.
Yeah.
And then we just connected over Zoom. So both sides. Then the traditional and the wedding happened really close to each other. And we had the wedding first, the church wedding first, and then the traditional wedding the next day. And then that was it.
Wow.
And we got married, and then literally from the wedding, I moved to Canada. So went to Nigeria for the wedding, and then from Nigeria moved to Canada with them. And it's been good ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so heartwarming. Okay, Steve, now that you've been married for over a year,
Yeah.
has married life lived up to your expectations? And how has it been? This girl that you waited for 24 years.
Oh, well, it's been beautiful actually, and I think in our first year we've moved through a lot of life events that have been really, really challenging. But I think the bigger picture is it's been almost exactly as I would have wanted it to be. So you never really have a picture of this is what exactly you want, but the kind of answer or the kind of result you want. And it's been that, from maybe our relationship together, life events that we're going through, different things that happen, and how we were able to handle things. Beautiful all along. And I'm not saying it because she's here. It's really been nice. Then the other part that I think it would be important to mention, especially if there are people listening who are trusting God, all the specific things I prayed about, everything God answered.
Wow.
Every single thing, including the way I would want her to be at home, the way that, every single thing, so I think that has been really helpful. There have been some times when maybe she does something and maybe she expects me to be like, oh wow, you did that for me. And I don't come up with that kind of reaction. Somehow at the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, I prayed about this, so I'm not surprised. So, I mean, I have to work on that. But
you have to act surprised. Yeah. Ore, how did you feel when you found out that he already had a card in your name even before you said yes?
It was just wow, because he sent it to me on his flight back.
Yeah.
So he didn't send it elsewhere. So he sent it to me like after I said yes, so it was on the flight back, and I was just like, wow. Yeah,
I had it in my wallet, but when I eventually got the yes, I was shocked. I wasn't even thinking. So I think I was still at the airport in Canada, waiting for my last leg.
Okay.
And that was when I was like, oh, by the way, I took a picture, sent it to her, and
wow.
it was just
wow. Okay, wow.
That's amazing. Okay, so it could be either of you. What advice would you give other couples who might be facing a long and challenging journey together or to be together? What advice would you give?
Trust God. I mean, if they're already a couple, they already did half the battles won. Like in our case, like getting to being a couple was the issue. Yeah. I think trusting God is a lot of it, and trusting that God fulfills His word, and trusting even above that God causes everything to work together for our good, both the good, the bad, the ugly. Because you could have looked at it and said, okay, but why did God allow that relationship to happen for him, such that it ended up, two people heartbroken, right? But then God used it in different ways for both of them. So it's not the way we would have individually planned things, but God still makes everything work together for our good. So it's just staying with that consciousness, but also praying for that and reminding yourselves that, okay, God loves me even more than I love myself. And He's willing to make everything work together for my good. Again, both the good, all the good, bad, and the ugly. So it's just remembering that. I think that would be my major encouragement.
Yeah, I think what I would add to that is, generally at the place of work, you never get promoted to a position that you are not already acting out, So I usually, because I do mentoring for young men,
Yeah.
so one of the things that I tell them is you have to start praying for your wife. You know, why would you expect to be married when you're not already praying for your wife? Why would you expect to be married when you're not already praying for your husband? Because as a wife, must pray for your husband every day. For your, as a man, you must pray for your wife every day, so that is the point where you get graduated into that level. And then it will also help you, with the Spirit of God to fine tune your desires. As you pray, God will show you things that you need to be paying attention to, and you keep praying about it, and you'll be working with God, to craft that future that you desire. So when I look at my wife today and all the things she's helping me with and the things that we're doing together, I'm like, I may not be praying it now, but I can remember I prayed it for many years, and I was praying for her by name. Now, if you don't know the person yet, just pray for your wife, and then eventually when God gives you whoever it is, then you put a name tag on it, but your prayers will never be wasted. So it's something that I say, it helps you build with God, as you journey in life, to the fulfillment of, marriage and all of that. So that's one thing I would say.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask you. So if you were to describe each other in 3 words, what would they be? The 3 words. All right, you go first. Describe him in 3 words.
I'll describe Steve in 3 words. He loves. Okay, that's more than one.
Okay, go. You can go.
Okay, 3 descriptions.
Yeah.
He loves God.
Okay.
Definitely loves God. He says what he means. Like
he says what he
says means. Okay. He says he's going to do something. He's going to do it.
Okay.
And he's loving.
He's loving. Okay, Steve, describe her.
Give me a second. I just want to check the charger on this thing because it looks like it's about to go off.
Okay, we're going to
give me a second.
Go in 1 minute anyway.
Okay,
you can check it.
Steve,
you go.
Okay. The 3 words, I would say she's very supportive, very courageous, and very loving.
Very courageous, very supportive, and very loving. That's good. Okay, last one, just for the fun of it. If your love story was a movie, what title will it be? So if they were going to do a movie about this 24 years with, what title will you give your both of you need to agree on that before we go.
Day 1.
Yeah. And you guys that are watching, you can help them. So if their love story was a movie, what will the title be? Destiny's Child. Okay, I think the internet's gone off. So yes, hopefully they'll come back. So if their love story was a movie, what will it be? Day 1. Bukola. I like that. I like Destiny's Child. Okay. Actually, I think I like Destiny's Child too. I like Destiny's Child. Yeah, I think I kind of like Destiny's Child. What the way too is that, yeah, I also like that too. Frozen in Love. I like that, Debo. I like that. Frozen in Love. That's not a bad one. The Reward. Okay. God is faithful. God's the reward. Okay. Ooh, okay. You guys are coming up with some really, really good names. Okay, yeah, sorry. Let me add it back on. Okay. The Reward. Okay. They're just gonna come back briefly and then we have to go. We've been on for okay.
Yes, we're back.
Right.
Sorry, the device kind of went off.
Okay. Meanwhile, people have come up with some names. Let me tell you some of the names. So there's Destiny's Child, Day 1.
Okay.
There's What's the Wait?
Okay.
Frozen in Love.
Okay.
God's Faithful. There's the reward. I think that's all that we have. Oh, my missing rib. That's another one. My missing rib. Catherine, the true love journey. Do you guys have your own, or do you want to go with one of these?
I like day one, but then I also like worth the wait.
Worth the wait is good.
I think I like Worth the Wait. Yeah. Okay. So that's the name of the movie.
I mean, we're looking for movie producers, so if anybody wants to help us with that, please reach out. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much, Ore and Steve. This has been really good. Wow. Honestly, it's amazing. 24 years of waiting for your rib to agree. If I'm the one, I would have knocked you on the head when you eventually got back. What took you so long? But, like we just said, it was worth the wait. And thank God, God answered all your prayers. So, yeah. Oh,
someone wrote finding Ore.
Finding Ore, finding my rib. Oh, that's great. So thank you. The magical love story. Okay, people are coming up with more titles now. But Steve and Ore, thank you so much. This has really been great. It's been great hearing your story and just to see how God kept both of you, and God kept you from marrying your ex, because that would have been another story. So then it would have been maybe the title would have been Restoration or something. I don't know.
God of second chances.
God of second, yes. So we really thank God, and we pray that God will continue to use both of you to expand His kingdom, to impact lives, and yeah, God bless you. And I know that is going to use your marriage to your marriage will be a light in the dark, because a lot of I'm sure you guys know that marriages are under attack now.
Yes.
But God is going to use both of you to bring light where there's darkness. So God bless you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Thank you. See you in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you. Take care.